Hello again. A while ago, I picked up these books in a local charity shop. They are, in fact, the books of the reading scheme which was used at school when I learned how to read. The Janet and John books. I'm sure that some older viewers will recollect these. These are in perfect condition. I was right pleased to get these. They were first published in 1949. And although the world they portray was perfectly familiar to me as a child, today they look about as dated as something from Victorian Britain. As L.P. Hartley remarked, the past is another country. They do things differently there. I thought I'd just look at one of these books and see how the world which it portrays has vanished. Not the world as a whole, there are bound to be technological advances and all sorts of changes, but rather the structure of family and childhood. Looking now at the life of the children shown in these books is very strange. To start with, the very names of the children, Janet and John, sound slightly outdated these days. Who calls their kid Janet these days? There is something quaint about the idea of a brother and sister being given such traditional names. Open the book, and we find, of course, that everybody is white, which is, I suppose, to be expected in the late 1940s and early 1950s. They live with their mother and father, which fewer than half the children in Britain now do. There is an assumption running through these books that everybody belongs in a nuclear family, mother and father, and their own children. One knows instinctively too that they are married to each other. This is a stable family. The children growing up in it know that their parents aren't going to get divorced or split up, and that they will still be together after the children have grown up and left home. Marriage was forever in those days. Then too, the children are not at school or nursery. They look to me to be about the age of 3 or 4, I suppose. They're not at nursery. They spend their days with their mother, who of course doesn't work. This too was the general rule at that time. Wives stayed at home while their husbands went off to work. Children stayed in the care of their mother until they started school when they were 5. This would be very unusual these days, when the trend is to get children away from their families at as early an age as possible. During the lockdowns, when nurseries and schools were closed, it was said that small children didn't learn to speak or socialise because they were no longer at nurseries, but instead stuck at home with their parents. This was a bit weird. In the days of the Janet and John books, all children learned how to speak and socialise with their parents to guide them, without any help from nurseries. This, it seems, is no longer possible. Without the state, children won't learn to speak. The children are about 3 or 4 years of age, but there's no hurry to rush them off to a childminder or nursery in these books. This is not merely an exercise in nostalgia. I'm wondering if the collapse, one might almost say abolition, of the traditional family has been to the benefit of the rising generation. Are children today calmer, more socialised and less prone to anxiety and worry than those in the 1950s? Is it better for them not to grow up with both parents, but instead to be part of what are sometimes called blended families, but were at one time known as broken homes? Is it better to hand over the raising of children and babies to the state rather than for families to see to this themselves? Are any of the new types of family, that is to say single mothers and pairs of homosexuals, raising children, demonstrably better for children than being raised by their mother and father? We are told that all these various kinds of new family structures are just as valid as the old-fashioned nuclear family. But is there any evidence for that assertion, or is it just the opinion of some left-wing sociologists? I find these sorts of speculations fascinating because an awful lot of what we believe or pay lip service today seems to have been handed down to us rather than our thinking the matter out for ourselves. Are the new types of family better than the old ones?